Well, welcome to Northaven Voices. I'm Nancy Black, and I'm talking with Dotti Timmins this afternoon. Dotti is a longtime member of Northaven Methodist Church. She's married to Tom Timmins and the mother of 3 children, no longer children. And she's been a mover and shaker at Northaven and has been for decades. So I'm so happy to talk to you today, Dotti, and let everybody else see what a great life you've had and what a great person you are. You're sheltering in place at your beautiful garden home there.
I hope that we don't have to continue to do this for all through the winter, but for right now it's beautiful outside, so it's nice to be here.
You certainly have a beautiful view in your backyard. I know that for sure. Dotti, in the midst of all the social unrest that's going on in our country and our state, our city, I'd like to hear about, you've done a lot of work at Northaven in regard to social justice for decades. And I would like to know you've had many jobs there and 4 major initiatives that you've done. And I want you to talk about those, if you would, please, and tell us which one is the most important to you and the one that has been the most satisfying of the work that you've done at Northaven.
Tom and I joined Northaven in 1968, and after that we moved quite a few times, so we were in and out of Northaven, but when we came back to Dallas we were always at Northaven. It meant that church has meant a lot to us for pretty much all our married life. When we first got to Northaven, Bill McElvaney was the minister, and there were, at the time when we joined, they were doing some sort of progressive theology courses. One of the Wesley teachers at the theology school was doing a series, and Tom and I both thought that was really so important that we went to all of those lectures. They were night lectures, and they were like once a week for about 6 weeks. So that was really our introduction to Northaven. We had gone there to church because another professor from SMU had invited us to come as his guest, and we really enjoyed Bill McElvaney. He was such a wonderful minister. The year after we joined Northaven, the co-op school was starting, and I had just had our oldest child, and so we didn't start that year, but the following year I started going to the co-op school. The co-op school was started actually by a group of Northaven women who were in a course called Explore, and they talked the church into starting this co-op school. And what that meant was that parents came and worked with the teachers and the kids, took turns coming and being there for them, which was a wonderful thing at that time. There weren't any public kindergartens, so to have a place that was not so rigid about what was happening there was a big thing for all of us that were involved in the co-op school. And at some point, all 3 of my kids went there, and I became the president of the co-op's board at one time. So after that, I think Bonnie was about to start kindergarten. She was our youngest child. I have 3 children, David, Chris, and Bonnie. And she was about to start kindergarten, and Tom was moved by his company to Denver. So we moved to Denver, and and so that meant that we were away from Northaven for a few years. We moved from there to London, then back to New Orleans. So it was a few years before we came back. But of course, every time we would come back to visit in Dallas, we would go to church, and there would be someone sitting there who would say, "Oh, you're back. Do you want to play bridge tonight?" So we really, Northaven was always kind of our home base whenever we would move back to Dallas. I guess the next thing that I was involved in at Northaven was a group that was started to talk about a reconciling initiative. At that time, there were a few churches in the United States who were reconciling churches. And so we decided to form this group to study what we could do to make gays and lesbians feel comfortable at Northaven, and what we could do to help them to be a part of what we wanted to be. So we started working on that, and then Tom and I moved again. And so we worked on, actually, Shirley Switzer was the person who was in charge of it. And there were probably 8 people on the committee. Shortly before we left Northaven to go to Calgary, Tom, Shirley Switzer died, and I'm not quite sure how long that group went on when we were gone at that time. So when we came back, actually 10 years later, they had begun once again to study trying to become a reconciling congregation. And shortly after we got back, we went to church one evening, and they were having a meeting where they voted on becoming a reconciling congregation. So it was a perfect time to come back.
Yes.
Then the next thing that we were involved in at Northaven was, of course, the new church, the decision to build another church. And Tom was on that the group that worked on doing, raising the money and also in getting the church itself built. So that was pretty exciting. That was very exciting time for us at Northaven, with all the beautiful building and all of the ways that we worked on it. One of the things that I did at that time was I did with a friend of mine, Julie Hoffmeister, we did the timeline that's up in the upper level of the atrium at Northaven, which was a timeline of all the ministers and their time at Northaven. So it was a really fun project. She was a wonderful artist and knew exactly how to do that. And I worked on comments on it. So that was really good. I guess the next thing that I would say, and probably the most exciting thing for me at Northaven, was having the garden built, the celebration garden. Marilyn Gandy had suggested to me that she thought we ought to have a new place to put ashes of members who had died. And so we formed a committee. There were like 21 people. And so I did the policy work on it with half of the group. And the other half of the group worked with Tom on trying to come up with a design for it. We had gone around and interviewed about 3 companies that we thought might be able to do that work for us. But we'd found out from one of them that the whatever columbarium we built was going to have to be connected to the church. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to put it further back in the lot than that. And so Tom and Bill Freeman, who's the man who built the columbarium for us, went to Austin and testified before a committee about that it was because it was just so unfair that they would there was one Houston had been allowed to have columbariums that were not connected to the church, but every other city in Texas was having to connect it to the church. So they went before this committee and they got the law changed on it. So that set us up for building the garden. So we built the garden, and it's been such a wonderful place, and so many families at Northaven have now actually bought a place there that they will have when their ashes are to be placed somewhere. I think it means a lot to us to have that space out in the out west of the church, because it's so beautiful, and people can go out there, sit there if they want to, really enjoy that. So to me, that's been probably the best thing that I've ever done at Northaven. It was just such a special feeling to have that available for our members.
It really is beautiful, and my favorite part is the labyrinth. I love it.
We at first we said, oh, we're only going to do a columbarium, and then someone said, well, we really ought to do a labyrinth. So we started looking at labyrinths, and that was the whole process was so interesting, and then the sculpture that we have out there first the cross, the big cross that's out there, was actually in a room in the old church and had been taken out and placed in somebody's yard. Oh. And so when we said, well, we'd really like to have the cross back, we had to haul it all back. And then, it was kind of, it was work by a lot of people to get all of that done. And then we have the water sculpture that a man named Davis Cornell did for us, and it's so beautiful. You can go out there and sit and listen to the water trickling down. Yeah. So, and I guess that's that's been what I've been doing ever since. Is I'm in charge of the celebration garden and try to keep it in good shape for everybody.
Yes, it's so beautiful, Dotti. And you also you've done quite a bit of traveling in your life. And tell us, you went to law school. Where did you go to law school?
When I graduated from TCU, I came to Dallas and got a job working for a lawyer in downtown Dallas. And so I decided I would go to night school. So I went to SMU night school for a couple of years, and I loved my job. It was a lot of fun. I had done that before in the summers in Marshall. When I knew a couple of lawyers in Marshall, and when their secretaries would go on vacation, I'd go in and take their place. So I knew a little bit about it. Anyway, and then after a couple of years, I transferred to the University of Texas and graduated from UT in law. So, and we've done, after I finished law school, Tom and I got married. And
it was like the week after or the day after you graduated, wasn't it? Or the day after you took the bar or something?
Well, he told me I had to pass the bar before we could get married. So I had to pass the bar.
And you married right after that, right?
I spent the summer in Austin studying for the bar and taking it, and then went home, and my mother had planned the wedding, and so I got there just in time.
And it was a double wedding with your sister.
My sister, who is the next youngest daughter of my parents, and I got married together. And that was fun. It was an outdoor wedding on August 1st in Marshall. Yeah, you almost burned to death, but anyway, it was beautiful. And Virginia Doopy was there. She was a teenager, and she said, I think she said, that it was the first wedding she'd ever gone to. She was very excited about it.
And so you all started traveling right after that, right? You and Tom moving around?
Well, we moved to Boston as soon as we got married because Tom was going to MIT. So we went up to Boston and lived there for 2 years. And then we came back to that. Then he got a job here in Dallas. And so that was when we first went to Northaven, when we moved back to Dallas then. Then after that, we moved to Denver. We moved to London, which was a really interesting place to live. We had all the 3 kids were there, and they loved it. They loved being able to take taxis and go on the subway, and it was a really nice, entertaining place to be. So we walked around a lot, visited a lot of places, went on little short trips to different cities, Edinburgh, and where else? Went to France, went to Spain, and so all the kids had a real education on living in a different kind of place, and they loved it. Then when we came back, we went to New Orleans, which was also, of course, a very interesting place to live. And when we lived in New Orleans, fortunately, when I was in college, I had gone to a school that had a computer program, and so I took this computer program. Computers at that time were the size of a room. I mean, it wasn't like it is now. It was a great big room, and they had all these boards that you would wire. And so I had learned to use a computer. So when we moved to New Orleans, and I wanted to do something, all the kids were in school, I went to work at a school there, a private school called Newman, and worked in their development office and ran their computers for them. So that was a fun thing to do. And then at the end, we were in New Orleans for 5 years, and then after that, we moved to Westport, Connecticut, and Tom worked in New York. And Westport was this, it's a beach town, and it has. We joined a church there that was the United Methodist Church in Westport, and so they would do things like they would have a whole bunch of people that would just say, okay, we're all going to go to the beach on Tuesday and have dinner, and they would take you could take a food, and they had fire pits, and you could just build your fire and have your dinner together. And I looked up today when I knew I was going to be doing this interview. I looked up to see what they were doing now, and they still do it. They go down to the beach, and it was always kind of fun to do that kind of thing. It was a real get together of church members. I'd love to see Northaven do that sometime.
Oh, fun.
Again, we have done things in the past where we did outdoor picnics.
Yeah.
So that might be something we think about now.
Good idea.
Yeah, it could be.
If we get out of this thing. If we can never quit wearing masks.
Yes, that's true. When the virus is gone forever, I hope. Anyway, then we moved. We came back to Dallas, and stayed. We're here for the time for a few, how long? 5 years probably, and then we moved to Calgary, And that was also another interesting place to live. They had so many things going on. Beautiful, beautiful city, very clean. Had lots of downtown artwork, and you'd go downtown, and there would be singers and dancers, and a lot of we made a lot of good friends there, and so then. And I would have happily stayed in Calgary for much longer, but after 2 years, they moved Tom to Virginia. And so we were there for a couple of years after that. And then came back to Dallas. So we've now been back here 22 years.
Wow. Well, that is a lot of traveling and a lot of different places. I envy you for those experiences.
Well, it was, it was exciting. We were very fortunate that the places we lived were, generally speaking, good places to be.
Right.
And we made lots of friends all over the world during that time.
And there was an experience you had with some Laotian families, wasn't there, somewhere?
In Westport, Connecticut. The church that we belonged to there had brought. There were people from Vietnam and also from Laos who were being brought to the United States as refugees, and so that church had already had one family who came, and they had taken care of them. And when Tom and I got there, they had another family who was the same family, but the brother of the first one. His name was Kamani Vong, and his wife's name was Tuma Kamani Vong, and she was just a wonderful person. So they asked me if I would be willing to take charge of making sure that they had a place to live. And so they got there, and they didn't speak any English. They had 5 children, and so I found them a home, an apartment, and got them, and the church supported them while, when they first moved in, and they both got jobs after that. One of them actually had been a doctor, but couldn't be allowed to practice medicine in the United States, so they had to find something else to do. And I got the kids in school. I guess one of the main things was none of them had ever been in an automobile. And so I got them in a car, and we started out, and they all got sick at their stomach. So I would go home, and I would go in and get my teenage son, Chris, to come out and hose the car out. But anyway, when I was a little girl, my mother used to always say that she would give us pieces of lemon to suck if we were in the car, if we thought we were going to get sick. So I started slicing up lemons and taking them with me when I would take them to the doctor or the dentist, or I took them all through, kind of getting their whole life situated, and it was so much fun to do. I knew that I needed to get them, furniture, and I also needed to get them things like refrigerator, stove, all that kind of thing. And so I was lying in bed one morning, and I was thinking, oh God, please help. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And the phone rang, and it was a woman. She said, I just got married. I'm 50 years old. My husband and I both have a house, and I want to give you all the furniture out of my house. Oh. It was like, it just dropped out of heaven. It really did.
Oh, wow.
It was so wonderful. And so it was, that was a really special time in my life. I enjoyed doing all that work with the church.
I'm sure.
So,
Dotti, tell us, in back of you is a beautiful painting. And can you, who is that? I know who it is, but I want you to tell us so we know.
It's Michael, the Archangel Michael.
Yes.
And my my brother-in-law painted it. He was an artist here in Dallas, and then he moved to Austin later in his life. But I had told him I wanted a painting for this room, and so he said he would do one. He had actually had a brain tumor, and so he was having a hard time trying to get back into his painting. And when he started working on it, he told my sister, he said, I don't know, there's something, he said, I don't usually do portraits or, paintings of people, but this really seems like a person to me. And so he started doing some research and said, for Tom and Dotti, I think what I really want to do is the Archangel Michael. Wow. So he showed up here one day with the painting and walked in and said, what do you think?
It is gorgeous.
Yes, it is gorgeous.
And he's got some warlike symbols on him, doesn't he?
He does. The Archangel Michael was a shield, and he had a shield, he had his spear, and he had, and usually when you see pictures of the Archangel Michael, he has a helmet on of some kind. But Tony didn't like the idea of a helmet, so he has sort of a Renaissance hat on. But it's a wonderful painting, and we think it's one of well, Tom always says it's the best thing he ever did.
It's really gorgeous and fits your house.
Yes, it is beautiful.
Well, Dotti, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Glad to do it. It really made me go back and remember a lot of things that I'd kind of let them fade from my mind. So some of the things are very special to me, and I'm delighted to have been able to share them with you.
You're such a giving person and a great contribution, not only to Northaven, but your family and everybody, all your friends. So we love you.
Well, I love all of you too.
Thank you so much, Dotti.
Okay, nice to be with you.